And I'll tell you what, yes, it's 2025. And yes, the world has changed since the 1950s. But one thing that has not changed and which will never change, because we as human beings are communicators. We are connectors. We are people who don't live in isolation, but we actually live in community with each other. And I'll tell you what, whether you're a public speaker, whether you're a politician, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're an investment guy like a Warren Buffett, whether you are a pastor in a pulpit, whether you are doing any type of industry where you're interacting with people, the most important skill you can learn is how to communicate with people. And so when I say the best investment by far you can make is investing in yourself, what I'm actually saying specifically is you and I learning how to become exceptional speakers. Hey everybody, thanks so much for taking a couple moments to tune into this video where I want to talk about the best investment you will ever make. Now, what's so funny to me, being kind of in the self-help industry, being an executive coach, being a leadership coach, being an entrepreneur myself, is you hear a lot of people talking about self-care today as if it's like a bunch of bubble baths or lighting some candles or drinking a big glass of white wine or red wine or whatever. And I'm not anti any of that, but it's really interesting to me that when you think about self-care, what you're really thinking about is the best investment that you can make in yourself. At the end of the day, you are your greatest asset. And so what's really interesting, I'm sure you've heard of this sort of famous investor named Warren Buffett, of course, one of the top 2 or 3 richest people literally on the planet. And interestingly, years ago, there was a group of students who came to him in his home in Nebraska, and they actually were asking him, hey, we want the best investment. What is the next stock tip? What is the thing that we should be putting our money into? And they were thinking that he would tell them about some company that was a secret that nobody had heard of, or that he would give them some secret from a meeting that he had with some bankers or something like that. And they were absolutely shocked when he pointed at a diploma on his wall from a public speaking course that he had taken with Dale Carnegie in the 1950s. And he actually said, the $100 that I spent on that public speaking course was the best investment that I've ever made. Now, that is absolutely unbelievable to me. When you think about literally one of the richest people on the planet, a guy who has made tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in the stock market, in the money markets, in finance. And yet here he is saying that the best investment he made was about $100 that he spent on a Dale Carnegie speaking course way back in the 1950s. And of course, you actually do the math and you realize that really what Warren Buffett actually does is he's a speaker. Now you say, well, no, he's a finance guy, and he kind of is. But a lot of finance guys aren't anywhere close to as successful as Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett also mastered the art of communication. I mean, what takes Warren Buffett and elevates him from being any regular finance guy to actually one of the richest people on the planet? And that is his ability to communicate, to persuade investors, and to bring them to put their money with him. And then way back in the 1950s, Warren Buffett learned how to public speak. He was able to stand in front of a rooms full of potential investors. He was able to persuade, influence, and motivate them to invest their money with him. And then he was able to take that money, and here we are later, literally decades later, but hundreds of billions of dollars later that were generated from that $100 that Warren Buffett spent on that speaking course. And then Warren Buffett summed it all up by saying this: the best investment by far is developing yourself. Now let's take a look at that statement for just a moment. You think about this idea of self-care, and really, am I caring for myself if I don't invest in myself? Am I caring for myself if I'm not putting into myself that sort of personal and professional development that's going to take me to the next level? That's why I want to extend an incredible invitation to every one of you who's listening to this video or watching this video here today to actually consider taking what we call our Elevate EST Exceptional Speaker Training Academy. Now, in the Elevate EST Academy, we're going to teach you the fine art and craft of being a communicator. And I'll tell you what, yes, it's 2025. And yes, the world has changed since the 1950s. But one thing that has not changed and which will never change, because we as human beings are communicators. We are connectors. We are people who don't live in isolation, but we actually live in community with each other. And I'll tell you what, whether you're a public speaker, whether you're a politician, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're an investment guy like a Warren Buffett, whether you are a pastor pastor in a pulpit, whether you are doing any type of industry where you're interacting with people, the most important skill you can learn is how to communicate with people. And so when I say the best investment by far you can make is investing in yourself, what I'm actually saying specifically is you and I learning how to become exceptional speakers. Now, one of the incredible things about becoming an exceptional speaker is that this is not really about your charisma, and it's not even necessarily about do you have natural inclination or talent as a speaker. It's actually a set of skills and tools that you can develop. And when you have it, exceptional speaking, number one, empowers you to cast your vision. I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges today, and one of the reasons why somebody like a Donald Trump came along and resoundingly won the 2024 election in the United States, and why incumbents literally all over the world are falling like dominoes, is because the incumbents don't have a vision. They actually are trying to sell the public on this idea of more of the same. All we need is just more of the same. I'm a Canadian, and right now, very clearly with the resignation of Justin Trudeau, people are saying we don't want more of the same. We don't want more of your left-wing garbage that's only going to take us down a path where we destroy our own wealth and we lose pride in our own country. We actually want somebody to cast a vision for the future. Let me tell you, people do not respond to need. They're surrounded by needs. They respond to vision. I'll tell you what, the future belongs to those who can articulate a vision. Where are we going? What are we going to do when we get there? What kind of world are we seeking to create together? I'll tell you what, Martin Luther King Jr. did not say, I have a plan. He said, I have a vision. I want to create a better world. And I'll tell you, when you become an exceptional speaker, it gives you this unbelievable capacity to paint a picture using words. We call that a vision. It's a preferred future. Here's where we're going. This is what we're going to build. This is what we're going to create together. And I'll tell you what, this is a skill that you can learn. Whether you're a salesperson trying to show your customer about the preferred future when they purchase your product, or whether you're a politician seeking to convince the public about the kind of policies that you would implement, whether you are a real estate agent painting a picture for your customer of how their life will be moving into their new home. Hey, whether you're a parent, I've got 4 kids, and you want to paint a picture for your kids about the kind of life that they can create if they just listen to your advice and follow what it is you're trying to teach them. I'll tell you what, exceptional speaking empowers you to cast a vision. This is essential. Where there's no vision, the people perish. You know it the same as I know it. The second thing exceptional speaker empowers you to do is to captivate your audience. I'll tell you what, there is nothing worse than a boring speaker. There's nothing worse than somebody who does not know how to captivate their audience. I'll tell you what, it's crazy to me that Mr. Bean episode, and I don't know if we could show it here, because of copyright law, but it's so funny when you think about that Mr. Bean episode where he's in church, and I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, just search Mr. Bean Goes to Church, and you'll see him falling asleep in the pew as he's listening to the minister, the pastor, from the podium, from the pulpit, drone on and on and on. I'll tell you what, I heard a story about a guy who died in the middle of a church service, and so they called the paramedics, and they had to go through 5 different people before they found the right one, because, the other 4 just looked like they were dead because they were so bored. I'll tell you what, there is something about learning how to captivate your audience. This is not about shouting. It's not about screaming. It's not about, getting up there and being all angry. There is something about an exceptional speaker that's attractive. It's that warmth. It's that eye contact. It is the fact that they know how to smile. It's the fact that within 60 seconds, they've learned the capacity to actually hook and attract the attention of their audience. Yes, we live in a world where attention is the commodity. It is the currency. And so today, you and I, if we don't learn how to be exceptional speakers and to captivate our audience, I'll tell you what, we're going to be stuck in a place where we're talking, but nobody's listening. And I can't think of anything more frustrating. Listen, you don't really have a right to be heard. Hate to break it to you. You have a right to learn the skills of effective and exceptional speaking so that people will actually want to listen to you. And I'll tell you what, that's really, really important. The capacity to be an exceptional speaker so that you can captivate your audience. The third thing that becoming an exceptional speaker will do for you is it will empower you to communicate your story. Did you know that more than any other thing, your story will move people. We all have heard it that facts tell, but stories sell. And there's nothing more powerful than story. The biggest challenge that a lot of people have is they haven't really been able to learn how to articulate their story. And not just to articulate their story in a way that's boring or that's just, okay, I did this and then I did that, and like they're sort of reciting a resume, but actually reciting parts of their story, sharing like a campfire, sitting around the campfire, their story in such a way that people actually want to hear. And so becoming an exceptional speaker, it empowers you to cast your vision. I'll tell you what, that's so important. It also inspires you to attract your audience so that people are captivated by what you have to say. But third, it allows you to share your story. Number fourth, it allows you to convince your skeptics. I'll tell you what, we live in a skeptical generation. We live in a generation where there is a loss of trust. We live in a generation where there's a loss of credibility. You and I know it as well as anybody. I'll tell you what, when you listen to some pencil-neck politician going off with their scripted lines and they're just telling you something that was written by a copywriter somewhere that they haven't even met, and they're not speaking from the heart, they're not speaking from that place of authenticity and vulnerability, you and I, we just shut that out right away. I'll tell you what attracts people is the capacity to actually be authentic, to be vulnerable, to actually speak to the heart. You got to get past the head. Now, thousands of years ago, Aristotle talked about this in what's called The Art of Rhetoric. It's a book that he wrote thousands of years ago, like well over 2,000 years ago. And he talked about the fact that to be credible, speakers need to learn three things. They need to have logos, they need to have ethos, and they need to have pathos. Now, maybe you don't know what these things are. That's okay, because they're Greek words and they're not necessarily common if you're watching this video in English or India or, the United States or wherever you're watching from. And so the word logos means you need to have logic, essentially, right? So of course, to be credible, you have to be logical, but that's not enough. It's so interesting to me, the focus, and whenever somebody talks about misinformation and disinformation, you know that they are the greatest purveyor of that misinformation and disinformation. You know as well as I do, these folks are mostly all liars, the ones who are talking about this so much, because the ones who are actually speaking truth don't have to spend a lot of time, spending all of their time focusing on misinformation and disinformation because they're simply operating already from a place of logic. But then ethos is this idea of how do you live? Do you live a credible life? Are you an ethical person? Do you have integrity? And I'll tell you what, of course people have been burned by the mismatch between how somebody talks and how they walk. Of course people have been burned by the discordance between, some politician out there telling everybody else, hey, you should be worried about climate change, but they're flying all over the world on their private jets, trying to tell us how to live our lives. Like, it's just absolutely a joke. And so 2,500 years ago, Aristotle identified that we need some ethos, okay? You can't just, talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. And then the third thing that Aristotle talked about was pathos. And this is the capacity to be moved by emotion. And so when you become an exceptional speaker, I'll tell you what, you learn, like, hey, here's how you convince your skeptics. You don't convince your skeptics by talking about misinformation and disinformation. No. You weave together logos and ethos and pathos. I'll tell you what, and we teach you that in the Elevate EST Exceptional Speaker Training Academy. It's an absolute game changer. The fifth thing that exceptional speaking will empower you to do is to close your sales. Now, if you go back to Warren Buffett, he actually said that the $100 course that he took by Dale Carnegie on how to be a good speaker way back in the 1950s, he said that's the most important course I ever took, more important than the finance or the college degrees that he got. And he said that's why I'm successful today, because Warren Buffett understood that no matter how great he was at understanding the mechanics of finance and where to invest and where not, well, that's important. But if you can't communicate that knowledge, then you're not actually going to be able to help anybody. And so what if all of your knowledge is trapped by your inability to communicate? Like, what if you're the smartest guy in the room, but every time you open your mouth, nobody listens to you because you haven't learned how to actually persuade? And that's really the art of closing sales. Now, everybody is selling something. I mean, hundreds of years ago, I'm not sure who it was, or a couple hundred years ago, or 150 years ago, I think it was Robert Louis Stevenson, or somebody said everybody's selling something. And it's actually true. I mean, moms are selling their kids on, hey, brush your teeth, take a shower, wash your hair, comb your hair, get dressed properly, do all of that. Teachers are selling their students on what they're teaching. I'll tell you what, real estate agents are selling selling their property. Investment advisors are selling you on one course of action versus another. I'll tell you what, if you're asking somebody on a date, you're selling the possibility of a long-term relationship with yourself. I mean, we're all selling something, but here's the challenge. What if you don't know how to persuade? What if you've got the best solution, but the worst story? I mean, what if you've got the smartest idea, but a lack of inspiration? Well, no one's going to come with you on that journey. And so really interesting to me, the power of learning how to speak and what it will do. When I learned how to speak, I'll tell you what, my sales absolutely went through the roof. Not so much because my product got better, but because my description of the product got 100 times better. Tell you what, exceptional speaking empowers you to close your sales. But here's the last thing it does for you is it enables you to crush your competition. Let me give you just a thought to remember. In business, the best communicator wins. Always. If you want to crush your competition, it's not so much about trying to crush your competition. It's about becoming a better communicator. Because if you can become a better communicator, I'll tell you what, your competition won't have a hope, okay? And so what's the solution to all of this here today? Well, I want to extend a warm invitation to you to join us for the Elevate EST Exceptional Speaker Training Academy. This is a deep dive into the actual mechanics of speaking. So what do we cover? Well, we cover the neuroscience of amazing speakers. We cover the art of persuasion. We cover obviously some of the biggest mistakes of ineffective communicators, but we also cover how is it that if you happen to make a mistake while you're on a platform or a stage in front of hundreds of people or 5 people, you can recover from that mistake and continue in such a way that you will move forward. It's really interesting to me, and as a Canadian, just watching the mechanics of the last US election and just kind of watching a guy, like a Donald Trump, and that doesn't mean I enjoy all of his policies or all of his perspectives. Hey, I don't even get a vote, so it doesn't really matter. But really, he's a guy who excelled in the art of persuasion and the art of communication. And then you compare him to the competition, no matter where you stand from a Kamala Harris perspective. I mean, when her teleprompter would go down, she would freeze up in front of an audience of thousands of people. And I, as a professional public speaker now for 30 years, I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine being so wedded to my teleprompter and my technology tools and my notes and all of those things that if it goes down, because it will. I mean, all this great technology is wonderful, but at some point it's going to fail. You know it as well as I do. So then what? Like, how do you become vulnerable in front of your audience in a way that's not manipulative, in a way that actually builds trust and builds that connection rather than makes them want to run out of the room in panic and fear? And so, there's a guy named Thomas from the United States. He said, Elevate EST. And by the way, EST stands for Exceptional Speaker Training. He said, it changed my life. It built my confidence. It empowered my career. Joanne from Canada, she said that Elevate EST opened my eyes to the possibilities that exist when you can break your fear and learn the skills to speak. That's what she said. And I was there in the room when that transformation happened. I mean, she came in, she was so afraid. Within 30 minutes in this program, everybody has to start preparing and then give their first speech. So this is not a program where you listen to us talk about speaking. This is a program where you actually get to roll up the sleeves and dive into the process of communication. It is an absolute game changer. Tell you what, Ashraf from Asia, he said, Elevate EST changed my life. And that's because when you can learn how to speak and you see that beautiful lady at Starbucks, you can go ask her on a date because now you have that confidence that comes. Somebody can put you in a boardroom and you're going to be able to share your vision. You're going to be able to answer tough questions because you've learned the capacity to be comfortable and to feel safe internally. You're out of the amygdala. You're at the area of the prefrontal cortex where all that magic that's already in you comes to the surface. And so I'll tell you what, come along the ride for the Elevate EST Exceptional Speaker Training Academy. I'll tell you what, when you learn to become an exceptional speaker, it empowers you to cast your vision. It empowers you to captivate that audience. It empowers you to communicate your story. It empowers you. It changes you to be able to convince your skeptics, because we've all got them. It empowers you to close your sales. And I'll tell you what, it empowers you to crush your competition. And if you can crush your competition, there is an unbelievable capacity of upward trajectory that is in front of you. Let me just close with one final thought. And all the details about the program, it's in the post below. You can reach out to me anytime individually. We'll be happy to help you so you can get all the info that's there. But can I just say this? When I learned about how to become a great speaker, the greatest thing that changed was my capacity to impact other people, because there is always medicine for other people in your pain. And many of you watching this video here today, listening to this video, if you're just on audio, I'll tell you what, you've had some pain. The challenge is your pain is kind of just your own. And what I discovered is that when I learned how to speak, the pain that I was able to share with people actually brought unbelievable medicine and healing now literally to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And that's my vision for you in Elevate EST Academy Exceptional Speaker Training. So we'll see you there. Register today. Make sure to follow and like and comment below. Love to hear your thoughts on this. And I'd love to also hear about your experiences as an unbelievable, exceptional speaker. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you in our next episode.